Hey everyone, good evening. It's Monday night. It's 8 o'clock again. It happens every week. We hit a Monday night at 8 o'clock. It's great to have you with us. And let me open up the right page so I can still see Mr. Richard Barrett. There he is. He's still here. So, hey, Richard Barrett, I've got to say that to start with.
Hey!
It's great to have you here. I know there is much excitement and energy and feeling the love. I don't know if you've been feeling the love in the last 24 hours since we started putting it out that you're going to be here.
Hopefully, I've been feeling the love. I've been feeling the love. Absolutely.
Good. Well, it's, as I say, it's great to have you here. Folks, good to have you back this week. I know we had to juggle the days around last week a bit, but we're back to our usual Monday night thing. And I'm going to crack straight on. Normally, I might dribble on a bit at the beginning, but I'm going to do less dribble because the quality of our dribble tonight is so extraordinary with Richard on. I want to give him as much time as possible. So I'm honored to have you here. For those of you that don't know Richard Barrett, he's internationally recognized author, speaker, thought leader, founder of Barrett Values Centre, fellow of World Business Academy. And so I came across Richard probably maybe 3 years ago. So I studied spiral dynamics a lot. I was fascinated by Frederick Laloux's work, and a consultant I was working with on a piece of work said, hey, I'm doing this Barrett profile. I'm like, Barrett profile, never heard of it. And I looked a bit closer and I dug deep, and I immediately loved what I found, and loved the data and the insight that we got about this particular team. And I went and studied it, and as you know, Richard, I did the consultant's course, and have to say, it's absolutely revolutionized the way I work with organizations and culture and individuals. And what's so great to see is that the quality of what comes up and the quality of the conversations that are started and people's very immediate insights, actually it's resonated with everyone where I use it. So even in advance of this evening, I have a big thank you and love to give you for all that you've already given us.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so nice to hear.
And what we came about tonight was, so amongst the BTFI tribe, if you're not in the BTFI tribe, we'll pop the link in for you to join. We've had conversations a lot in the last 7, 8, 9 months plus around good mind hygiene. So how do we live well? How do we create an existence of being a happy human being, whether that's running our own business, a part of a corporation, or just in the rest of our lives, in the wider sphere of our lives? And it kind of struck me at that point, Richard. I read your book, The Psychology of Human Wellbeing, and that struck a lot of chords for me about the connection between soul and ego and well-being. And it seemed obvious that we get you on here to talk about much of your work. I know not all of your work, because I've already said before we came online, we'd be on here for hours and weeks and months. But at least to start skimming the surface and just to get a glimpse into the mind of Richard Barrett. And you know, the well-being industry is massive, isn't it? It's like, so in 2015, I put down a couple of stats earlier, about $3.7 trillion was spent on the whole well-being industry, and UK alone is worth about 26 billion euros. And although it's kind of blown out of all proportion, I kind of think we've lost sight of it a bit and lost in translation, that people are putting still so much emphasis on how they look rather than that doing that inner work and how they think and feel. So I want to cut straight to you, and I know that in your books, this is one of your books, folks. We're going to put some links in for the books. This is one of them that has had a big impact on me. The bookmark keeps moving around because I keep rereading it. But one of your quotes in there is about well-being is the feeling that you get when you're able to satisfy the needs at the stage of psychological development that you're at. Tell us a bit about this, Richard. Describe what you mean by this.
Yeah, well, people talk about well-being, and you know, I call it's a flatland conversation. They assume that everybody needs certain things to have a feeling of well-being. Well, that is not true. It depends on which stage of psychological development you're at. And so, well, people say, well, what are the stages? Well, there are 7 stages of psychological development, and every human being has the potential to go through these stages in their life. And if you're a successful human being, you will go through all 7 stages. However, if you get to a point where you don't master a particular stage, you may get held back. So, a favorite topic of mine is Donald Trump. It's one of my most downloaded blogs when I wrote about it. For example, Donald has been through the first 3 stages of psychological development, but has never got past there because he developed so many fear-based beliefs about not having enough, not being loved enough, and not being enough, that he's constantly trying to meet these unmet needs, which prevent him from individuating and moving into the higher levels of consciousness. So the first 3 levels of consciousness are about satisfying ego's needs. We all need to become viable and independent individuals in our cultural framework of existence. But once we've got there, which is around 25, we want to individuate. We want to let go of this parental programming and cultural conditioning so we can find out who we really are. And that then starts the upper 4 stages of development. We'll go more into that in a moment, I presume.
And so what's got in the way for Trump? And actually, is there any hope? Maybe we need to ask if there's any hope for him to move and progress through.
I believe not. He's reached he's reached the stage of life where these fear-based beliefs have become so embedded that it doesn't have enough, he's not loved enough, and he's not enough, that he is constantly now trying to convince people that he is somebody, and that he does have enough, and that he has a show wife to show that he is loved, you see. So no, I think most people, however, and most people on the planet actually have moving through all 7 levels, but actually I say most people have that chance. That's not quite true. If you're living in an authoritarian regime like the former USSR or North Korea, you will not have a chance to individuate because individuating means having the freedom and autonomy to be who you really are and speak your truth. And if you can't speak in a regime like that, you get it put in prison and you may never get out again. So not everybody has that possibility. And if you're still in poverty, you're going to be focused on your survival needs most of your life, and you never get past the survival, relationship, and self-esteem needs. Maslow talked about them. He called them deficiency needs. And as long as we have deficiency needs, then we're not going to be able to focus on our growth needs, which are the needs that we all need to express, connect, and contribute with to humanity.
Can you talk us a bit more, Richard, through the 7 stages of psychological development?
Sure.
How do people identify with the stage that they're at?
Yeah, well, you can begin by saying, well, how old are you? So let's start the game, Richard. How old are you?
It's going to be my birthday this week, but right today I'm 45.
Okay, well, brilliant. So you are in the middle of the self-actualizing stage. We'll get onto that in a moment. All right. So from 0 to 2 years old, you're in the surviving stage, and well-being at that stage of development is getting your physiological needs met. You know, you need food, you need water, you need to have your nappy changed, you need to be cared for. That's well-being for a baby. Then from 2 to 7, you move into the conforming stage where it's all about safety and security. You're living in a family environment, and you need to feel safe and secure and have a sense of belonging. That's what's really important for you at that stage. And then from about 8 onwards to about 24, you're in the differentiating stage. And these are, you see this in teenagers and young people. That means they want to be respected and recognized by their peer group, and they have a fancy hairstyle, a bit like you in a way. So they
except I'm not 25.
No, but we'll get to that in a moment.
I just kept the hairstyles just hanging over from my youth.
Okay. So anyhow, so each stage, so the teenagers in the early 20s are looking for respect and recognition from their peer group, and if they or from their parents. Then we comes to this next stage, the individuating stage, where we've now fully developed in human beings. By the way, during those first 3 stages, the first stage of surviving, we only have the reptilian mind brain fully functioning, and it's dominant. And then during the second stage, conforming, the limbic mind brain, the emotional mind, is dominant. And then we get to 7 or 8, and then from that age up to about 24, the neocortex is growing and developing, and that means the rational mind is growing and developing. And so during this whole 24-year period, our mind is growing and developing, and our brain is growing and developing. So whatever happens to us during this period becomes hardwired into our thinking and beliefs, and that's what creates the upsets later on in life. And some people have such difficulties getting these needs met, the survival needs, the relationship needs, and those self-esteem needs, that they're constantly looking to get those needs met because they never got them met in childhood. So that takes us up to the individuating stage, where now I'm 24, 25, and I'm going out into the world, and I'm wanting to find freedom or autonomy so I can be who I really am. Because up to this point, I've been wearing a mask. The mask I've been wearing is to fit into my community so I could get my needs met. And so now I've become viable, I've become independent, and I don't need to wear this mask. And I'm saying to myself, who am I? And now I begin to examine more deeply, ask myself the question, well, what are my beliefs? And what are my, most importantly, what are my values? And we need at this time space to explore who we are and to make mistakes and find out what we like and what we don't like and what we're good at. Then we come to the self-actualizing stage, which is where you are. And that is the stage where we are now looking for a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in our life. That's how the ego sees it. The soul, on the other hand, sees it as self-expression. How do I fully express who I am in this physical body, in this life? I came into this life to give this self-expression, and I want to express. The ego is looking for meaning and purpose. The soul is looking for self-expression. As we move then into the 50s, I've got my sense of meaning and purpose. I've found out what I love to do. And now in my 50s, I want to make a difference in the world by giving my gift. However, I can't do that unless I can connect with people. If I can't connect with people, how can I make a difference? So connect from the soul perspective, connecting is fundamentally important in the 50s. And then in the 60s, it's all about serving. Well, that's what the ego calls it. For the soul, it's about making a contribution. And so if you move through all these stages of development successfully, you lead a healthy, happy, long life. Now, each time you move to a new stage, you've got new challenges, and there's nothing to say you're going to get past those challenges and move on to the next stage. Particularly at the self-actualization stage, which is about self-expression. If you had problems in the first 2 years of your life getting your survival needs met, you'll have fear-based beliefs about being able to do what you love to do. For my case, I was a traffic engineer or transport engineer, and when I got to 45, I thought I was totally bored with my life. And I thought I heard my soul say transportation, but actually it said transformation. And so I had to change my whole life because that was my gift, transformation. And so I was telling this story to a friend of mine in Greece this summer, and she said, well, you know what? It sounds like you've been living a misspelled life. Anyhow, so brilliant. This is the stage where you find out what you truly want to do, what you want to express in the world. And then as in the next stage, the integrating stage, then you really go out and make a difference. But as I said, if you can't connect, you can't make a difference. Now, I link all this to well-being because if you fail to master a particular stage, it shows up as mental dysfunction or mind dysfunction and then bodily dysfunction. So for example, one of the difficult periods for women is this self-actualizing stage, this 40s, because A, they probably have a husband who needs a lot of looking after. Do you need a lot of looking after?
No, I'm very low maintenance.
Very good. They
Kelly,
have
you don't need to comment. Kelly will be watching. Kelly, you don't need to comment. It wasn't an invite, just a piece of information.
So women have a husband, they have children, and they've got aging parents. And so they tend to put the needs of these three groups ahead of their own needs. And so their self-actualization, their self-expression gets held back. Now, these stages link to the chakra system in the body. And that stage is the fifth chakra, which is the throat and the upper chest area. And they develop breast cancer if they're not able to express. Men, on the other hand, have a difficulty at the next stage, which is the integrating stage, where they need to connect with other people to make a difference. Because during their time, 2 to 7 or 8 years old, as little boys, they were said, don't show your feelings, be tough, etc., etc. So they learn not to be able to communicate and not to express their feelings. So when you come to your 50s now, that's a huge handicap, and that finished up as prostate cancer. And so, and then in the last stage, the serving stage, where it's all about contribution, if you had difficulties as a teenager in being respected and recognized, you won't have much self-confidence. So when you get to your 60s and you want to go out and make a contribution in the world, you don't feel confident enough. And that leads to all sorts of diseases, basically. So there's a very strong link between early childhood, adult development, and physical and mental dysfunction.
So I'm tempting to work out which question to go with first. There's so many gorgeous questions to ask you. So the whole, we know that the mental health stats seem to be worse year by year.
Yep.
Whether that's just that people are talking about it or whether they are really much worse. And certainly the stats around, children between the ages of 11 and 15, we can expect, 3 children out of 30 to have some kind of diagnosable mental health condition.
Yeah.
And so do you believe that most of the illnesses that we pick up in later life at some point in that 0 to 24 years is where the seed is planted for that?
Absolutely. I've linked, for example, the health data, the leading causes of death to the stages of development. I've also linked suicide rates to the stages of development. For example, suicide rates really take off around the age of 15, 16, 17. And that is when the teenager is not recognized by her parents, and is not recognized by a peer group. And that what happens in America is that's the school shooter, the one who goes in and kills all the other children in the school, kills children in the school, to be seen, to be recognized. I mean, and so when you fail at any particular stage of development, there are significant mental problems associated with that. And at each stage, so the suicide rate climbs up till the self-actualization stage. Once you get past the self-actualization stage, it tends to go down, although the risk of suicide goes down. But so people, for example, in their 40s who find themselves with a huge mortgage in a career that they chose, like I did when I was 17, and find that career is not satisfying, stuck in a job that they don't like, they're not fulfilling, and their soul expression, which is held back. And so all of this means that this ego-soul dynamic actually plays a significant part in our sense of well-being, mental health, and physical health.
Can you just, I'd love to hear you clarify. I've watched you talk about it before in some of your videos and read that you've obviously written a lot about it. Just to clarify for people watching the distinction in your words between ego and soul.
Yes. So the soul, everybody, it's interesting. I've done this so many times, but I'll tell you the result. Over the past 3 years, I've asked people in my audiences to stand up if a following statement is true, okay? So I say, I have a television, and they stand up, and then I say, I am a television. Of course, nobody stands up. Then I say, I have a car, I am a car. And then I say, I have an ego, and people stand up. And I say, I am an ego. Some people stand up. But then I say, I have a soul. People stand up. And then I say, I have a soul. I am a soul. And people stay standing. And I look at them. And this happens like 98% of the people do that. And I say, well, okay, so, you know, you're very clear about whether you have a television or you are a television, but you're not very clear about whether you have a soul or you are a soul. And so the truth for me is that everybody is a soul. You're the soul incarnated. It's an individuated aspect of the universal energy field. You are a soul, I am a soul. We're both individuated aspects of that universal energy field. So when I look at you, in a sense, I'm looking at another aspect of myself, because we both come from that same source. So then that says to me, well, if I give to you, I'm actually giving to another aspect of myself. And I love giving to myself, so I'm going to give to you. So it puts a whole new perspective on who you are and, you know, what your life is about. I do a workshop in Tuscany. It's 4 days of living in soul consciousness, where we take people from having a soul to recognize that they are a soul. And it changes everything. For, you know, you've commented on books, you know, on my book. I've written 12, 13 books. And most of those books are simply downloaded from my soul. You know, God, I wish my soul would learn to sleep, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I have a title for a new book, and I have the chapter headings, and then I have to sit down and spend a year writing it. So it's like the ultimate guidance system is living in soul consciousness, because your soul chose your body to live in this life, and it chose it for a purpose. And so if you can become the servant of your soul, you're home and dry. Because the issue with between the ego and the soul is that the ego lives in fear and the soul lives in love. And energetically, that creates a tension. So what is the ego? The ego is actually created by the soul roughly around the age of 2, protect itself from separation, because the soul comes from this fourth dimensional energetic perspective where there is total connection. And as the soul incarnates into the body and begins to realize in this 3-dimensional material world that there is separation. And for the soul, separation is pain. And so the soul creates the ego as a buffer to prevent the soul from this pain. And so the ego takes its job seriously, very seriously, and it's not aware that it was created by the soul. Now, the soul's ego does the same thing. Have you heard of alter egos? Well, the alter egos are other psychic entities. The soul created the psychic entity of the ego. The ego creates other psychic entities to block pain when it's feeling pain, roughly from the age of 2 onwards. So when a person creates an alter ego, it's to protect the ego so the ego can go on functioning, the normal ego. Now, what's so fascinating to me is that people can have several alter egos, and when one alter ego shows up, the physical body can have certain symptoms, certain sicknesses, can even be blind. And when that alter ego is no longer dominant, that person is normal. It is absolutely amazing how an alter ego can have different diseases, and when the ego itself is back dominant, they do the tests and the body is normal. So there's this amazing link between the mind and the body. Anyhow, so the soul creates the ego as a buffer, and what the soul really wants is to be present in 3-dimensional material awareness. So the will to survive, I've tried to find the explanation in the scientific textbooks for the will to survive, and there is none. The will to survive is really the soul's will to be present in our 3-dimensional material awareness. The ego takes that on. And during the first 3 stages of development, He learns to survive, to feel safe and feel secure. And then comes the individuating phase where you begin to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not that enculturated person. Who am I? And then so you begin to let go of all of the fears that you learned about getting your survival, safety, and security needs met in order to move into soul consciousness. So the ego-soul dynamic is always the dynamic between fear and love.
So for those that are, I'd love that. Thank you. So for those that are watching, going, wow, how do I start to move on this journey and kind of awaken my soul and awaken myself? And I know one of the ways is obviously to go on your course in Tuscany 4 days.
No. There's plenty of easy ways to do it.
How do people start that? Because there will be people here that are curious and don't feel yet awake.
There are 2 books that I wrote, one of which is, they're both very popular, but one is one's called evolutionary coaching. So it's for people in our business who are doing work with organizations. The other one is called What My Soul Told Me. And that is like my most popular book, because people tell me I sleep with it under my pillow, because it gives you the stages of learning to live. Yeah, it's true, they do. It gives you the stage. First of all, connect with your soul. Then you befriend your soul. Then you trust your soul. And then you become one with your soul. And each of those stages are explained in What My Soul Told Me. And there are little exercises you can do to move on that journey. And so it follows the stages of development that I already talked about earlier. What My Soul Told Me.
What I'm most gutted by is that no one's ever told me that they put my book under their pillow.
Well, you know, you're going to have to get over it. What's the fear?
That no one loves my book enough, and that I might have to sleep with it under my own pillow.
Okay, well, we can get into some counselling on that if you want, Richard. Do you want?
I'll give you a copy when I see you, and maybe
I'll put it under my pillow. Shall I?
For one night. For one night only.
Sure. No. Okay. Anything to get you over this difficulty, because I want you to self-express.
Okay, and then we're back to the whole hair problem. You picked up on the hair thing.
Yeah.
Let's move on from the hair anyway. It's not. We've already talked about your hair tonight before we even came on this, so let's not start talking about mine. I'm actually curious, and I know this goes off-piste from some of our questions that we came up with, which we kind of put together. But how did you how did you make this transition for yourself? I know you had that moment of realization from the place of board. What was your own journey to?
So here I am at the World Bank. I'm at the top of my game as a transportation engineer. I'm traveling all over the world, advising governments how to solve their urban transport problems. And all of a sudden, I'm bored. I hadn't been bored up to that point. I was very, very happy. I love my job, my career. And then I got bored. And I thought, my God, what's going on? And I stayed in that inquiry. And then I got my first message, which was write a book. Okay, I said, what on? So the book title was A Guide to Liberating Your Soul. Okay, so it took me 2 or 3 years to write that. I'm still at the World Bank, and I changed jobs in the World Bank. I'm no longer transportation engineer. I become assistant to one of the vice presidents for environmentally sustainable development. And then he seconded me to a new unit that is looking after values. By this time, I've finished my book on A Guide to Liberating Your Soul. And now I'm actually working on my second book, which again was given the title, it was Liberating the Corporate Soul. I had never been in that business before. I'd always been a transportation. I didn't know anything about business, but the message came, Liberating the Corporate Soul. And I wrote a book, and I developed a way of measuring the consciousness of organizations by mapping values to the 7 levels of consciousness model, which is the training that you've taken and that you use. That was all downloaded to me. It just came through me. And that, 5 or 6 years after that I'm bored experience, or perhaps 7 years after, was my passport out of the World Bank. I realized now that I had to get out and fully express this desire of the soul, of my soul, to help people liberate their souls. Because first book, A Guide to Liberating Your Soul. Second book, Liberating the Corporate Soul. It was becoming obvious to me that I had to write about the soul, because we always teach what we want to learn. And so that's been my journey. And, you know, I've written several books on organizational growth, on organizational culture, on values. And now I'm writing books about the values in nations, how you transform national consciousness at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, I'm deepening my understanding of this ego-soul dynamic process, which we all go through in the 7 stages of psychological development.
And we have to be receptive, right? If we're hearing and we're starting to listen and this stuff is being downloaded, already you must have been in a state where you were aware, open, receptive to what you were hearing. Because
yes,
I wonder how much we all hear stuff and we kind of just, it kind of gets brushed away.
Is that my ego or is that my soul? Oh God, I don't know. Yeah. So so from a very first of all, I was born at a young age, like we all are, and right from that young age, I
knew there was something different about you.
I was always interested from teenage years onwards on spiritual, esoteric, psychology. So even though I'm studying civil engineering at university and then transportation engineering at university and following that career, in my private lives, I'm reading everything I can on psychology, Carl Jung, Eastern mystics. I'm having conversations with disembodied entities. I'm exploring just about everything I can explore in this realm of something which I was trying to understand. Who am I? And so it was a natural progression for me to move from out of my career into this world, which I'd been studying all my life, basically. It wasn't like God pointed his finger at me and said, "Thou shalt be transformation." No. It was, I've been at it. I've been studying all my life. But what was interesting was the fact that I was able to work at the World Bank and travel the world. It gave me a global perspective on humanity, which is now fundamentally important to my books.
That's what you're doing, yeah. Okay, I know that there are a couple of questions coming in, and I just need to scroll through, so I'm not just looking away from you, although actually I am now looking for this question, adding it to my reading list. Richard T. Bob has a question. Where's Bob's question?
Hey, Bob, we'll get to you in a minute when Richard's got his...
actually, it's... actually, I can't scroll down enough to see it. So can someone pop it back in again? Kelly, can you pop Bob's question back in? Or Bob, even, can you pop your own question back in? Because I haven't got... It doesn't show me enough. Is this one? Is that the one?
Now, Bob, you have to understand, this is a vitally important question, because we wouldn't be spending all this time on it if it wasn't important.
This could be the game-changing question, Bob, and now we haven't got it. Okay, so there's another one here, and we'll get Bob's one in a second. So Jack says, this is Jacqueline, would be interesting to get Richard's view on whether the Western breakdown of family and community is an exacerbating factor of the stage barriers.
It is. I'm working. You mentioned earlier on, very briefly, something called spiral dynamics, and I've been working on rewriting that whole story around worldviews. And so, at each stage of psychological development, the average stage of psychological development is a reflection of the worldview of a particular community or nation. So we always elect people to govern us in democracies that represent the average level of consciousness of the people in a nation. So when Donald Trump gets elected, it's because he represents the average level of consciousness in that nation. When Theresa May gets elected, it's the same story. So we have to be able to shift the story or the worldview in a nation in an upward direction if we want to evolve and grow. Now, part of the Brexit problem is that some people got left behind. And these people are, I call them those people operating from wealth awareness. And the people who wanted to remain were a next stage of development called people aware. And there's nothing wrong with these different stages. It's just where we are and our history. So people awareness corresponds to the individuating stage of development. And there are only 7 nations on the planet that are operating from that level. Those are the Scandinavian nations plus Switzerland and New Zealand. So in these nations, we can find examples of policies and procedures which are actually aligned with the idea of individuation, of freedom and autonomy to be who you are. Whereas in our own nation, the UK, was one level down in wealth awareness, which is the last stage of ego development, where we are actually, I mean, it's amazing that when you really look into this worldview of wealth awareness, we're actually creating nations which are stratified by wealth. Housing areas are stratified by wealth. It's in the planning laws. It's everywhere, and so we've lost this sense of cohesion, this social cohesion, because we are allowed these tremendous inequalities to come into our lives through the current worldview of wealth awareness. You go to the Scandinavians and these other countries I mentioned, they've moved beyond that, and so people pay a lot of taxes, but they do so quite happily because the money gets spread and the whole nation is lifted. People don't get left behind, and right now that's what's happening in the USA, and that's what's happening in the UK, and that's why we have Trump, and that's why we have Brexit.
So what's it going to take, without getting onto a political Facebook Live, what's it going to take to shift UK?
Okay. I'm just finishing a new book, The Evolutionary Human. It's going out to get, in fact, I'm sending you a copy to get endorsement. Yeah, you don't know that, but I just put your name on a list today. It's a good list. It's not a bad list. You'll be all right. And so what I did was I looked at the 7 nations that were exemplifying this individuating stage of development, helping people to individuate rather than keeping them down in the ego stage of development. And I said, well, what are they doing? So there's a book that was written recently called The Nordic Secret. Why is it that Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland are always like the top right-hand corner of every graph? They're like succeeded in every way. And so the Nordic Secret, I'll tell you what happened. Around 1850, some of the leaders in Denmark got hold of an idea from Germany called Bildung, and they realized in Denmark and in Sweden that industrial revolution was coming, and these local rural communities, they had to educate people because they would be moving to cities, and they needed reading, writing, arithmetic, but they also needed a larger sense of identity other than their local community. They needed a national identity. And so they implemented a program which they called sounded like ego development. I would call it a process of helping people to individuate, move through differentiation and individuation stage. They targeted people from 15 to 30 years old, and that for several generations. And it shifted the whole mindset. Now, at the same time, in those nations, there was something called, and I've only discovered this about a year ago, or a friend of mine discovered it or brought it to my attention, the Law of Gentie. The Law of Gentie is, you'll find it only in these Scandinavian nations, but it basically are some rules for living which says, you're not better than I am, you should not poke your head above this, and you should not do this, and you should not. It's really about holding back excessive amounts of self-esteem and reminding you that you're part of a community. Now, you can talk to almost anybody in these Scandinavian nations, and they'll know about the Law of Gentie, the Rule of Gentie, but they don't talk about it. And basically what it did was it stopped the elites from having excessive power. And so there, in these Scandinavian nations, you have a sense of cohesion, you have a sense of collective responsibility for the common good. And that's where we need to go. And so I'm writing about that in my new book, which is called The Evolutionary Human. The reason it's called the byline for that book is how Darwin got it wrong. The Evolutionary Human, how Darwin got it wrong. It was never about species. It was always about consciousness. So in that book, I actually describe what I call evolutionary intelligence. And there are 3 algorithms for evolutionary intelligence. And these algorithms always kick in whenever an entity, an energetic entity, that could be an atom, a cell, a human being, whenever we get to a point where we are threatened and we don't know what to do, evolutionary intelligence clicks in, and it either says, you've got to become stronger and more resilient, or you've got to bond with other people so you can become stronger and more resilient. Or if you're already in a group structure, that group structure has to cooperate with other group structures to become stronger. And those 3 algorithms explain the whole of evolution from the Big Bang to the present day. And yeah, that's what that book's about.
So what back to the question about what has to happen here, what has to happen in the UK for there to be a shift, because we don't have the law of Gentie in place.
Right. So I believe what needs to happen, and this is what I've been struggling to understand, because I wrote a book several years ago, in 2009, called Love, Fear, and the Destiny of Nations. I've been trying to figure out what is required in order to shift the consciousness of a nation. And in that book, The Nordic Secret, and this idea of the Rule of Gentie, I have come to realize that a national program of education that was similar to that undertaken in Norway, which to help teenagers learn how to successfully differentiate and learn 20 and early 30-year-olds to individuate, that is what is needed in every nation. And this is something that you and I will be discussing at the meeting in November later this year. And I've really only come to understand that in the last 3 months. So this is something that I think of fundamental importance to replicate what happened in the Scandinavian countries in every nation. Because the people who wrote the Nordic Secret said any nation can develop a sense of cohesion. It requires helping people differentiate and individuate.
Yeah. And I wonder if any of our education system, and that admittedly that wouldn't be our whole system piece, but even as a small part of the system is beginning to do that. Have you looked into that yet? Whether that happens?
Well, okay, so that's the 15 to 30 from the kindergarten upwards. There are amazing things happening, and so there is an earlier part of the program that says every child should have a values-based education. They should know what values are and how to negotiate with values. Every child should learn to meditate. Every child should learn how to express its natural talents, connect with other children, emotional intelligence, and contribute to the classroom, contribute to the school. So if you teach people, these are the desires of the soul: self-expression, connection, and contribution. If we can teach our kids to do that at an early age, it will become so hardwired that they will sail through all the other stages of development and will create a better society for everybody.
I need to connect you with, I don't know if you know Ed Fido, who created School 21 a few years ago, but I'm going to connect you with Ed. We had Ed on here a few months ago, and actually I think what he's created in his system and his school in London is something quite extraordinary, which actually does play in that arena. I think the two of you need to just align thinking.
There is a website called Values-Based Education. If you Google that, you'll come up with it's happening in quite a number of schools, not just in the UK, but around the world.
No, that's refreshing to hear. Okay, so what are we getting? We're getting some messages. So actually that question that I asked from Jack was actually Bob's question.
Oh, so Bob, brilliant, Bob. Well done, Bob.
There you go, Bob. That's the way to do it, Bob. Richard T. Caroline wants to know how you define values.
Values, yeah. They are the energetic drivers of our aspirations and intentions. So you can go online to my company and you can do a free values assessment. It's called Values Plural Center, CNTRE.com/PVA, Personal Values Assessment. And it takes you about 5 minutes to do that. And then 2 minutes later, you get this plot. You pick out 10 values that are important to you, and you get this plot against which levels of consciousness you're working from or operating from. So basically, if you have a group of people sitting around a table and I say to these people, look, pick out 2 or 3 values that are important to you: commitment, honesty, friendship, whatever you want, and write down what is your belief about that value and what behaviors you would be actually expressing if you live that value. And then share your answer with your neighbor. Something amazing happens. As these 2 people connect and talk about their values, the energy between them increases unbelievably. And they begin to realize that their values, they may not be exactly the same, but they are they're operating from similar levels of consciousness. And so values are actually the framework for the decision-making that we should use, not beliefs, because beliefs separate people, whereas values unite people, because at the core, we're all basically souls.
I worked with a team, probably it was a month or so ago, we started working together, and we did, before we did the whole Barrett report, we did some real simple conversation about values. It was a team that was very dysfunctional. Within your language, it would be about, entropy was high. Yeah. And they had this kind of moment of it where the room lit up, where they had these conversations and they started talking about personal values, and you just see this, energetically, in the frequency lifted, and it was almost like they were able to rise above this kind of very heavy energy that they were stuck in as a team, as a collective, what they were working around, what they felt they were kind of battling around. Just a very immediate shift to something, just to see that connectivity happen.
So that's why I define values as the energetic drivers of our aspirations and intentions. Whereas beliefs,
the energy. Sorry, go on.
Whereas beliefs are just assumptions we hold to be true, and we don't know whether they are true, but somewhere along the line we learn this belief and we use it for decision making. Whereas values come from the very core of our being. That's why we get so energized when we talk about them.
The energy in the room was palpable, actually, and what was just kind of real bliss point, sweet spot, was that I didn't need to point that out to them. They spotted it themselves. They could feel it. Yeah. And feel it not just about their own conversation, but feel it about just that kind of that collective energy in the room. It was a great moment.
By the way, on the personal values assessment, if you go online and do that, you might encourage your girlfriend or boyfriend to do the same, or the rest of your family, and they share the results. You can find out just how compatible you are.
Nice idea. There we go. So some people saying done the assessment. Some people, I did it. Jack, I did it last week in anticipation. We got some really good people, really diligent people in our group, I have to say.
I can see that. Yeah.
Okay. So any other question, folks? You've got do keep them coming. I know there's a lovely comment here from Helena says, Richard B, you are so clear and so inspiring. I like that she carves that out about you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, you're working on it, right?
I know. We're working together. It's going to rub off on me at some point. Love that you bring this to the fore. She also had a comment about, I love that my mother is being so well looked after in Denmark following a stroke. She's being cared for by amazingly and being supported. Her own willpower is, I don't know actually, because it cuts my sentence off, but her own willpower is something. But clearly she's having a great experience in Denmark with the system and the way she's being cared for.
Good.
Okay, so let's go back into our kind of stream of questions. We're already at 10 to 9. So in your book, A New Psychology of Human Wellbeing, which is this one here, just one of them. I haven't got all 12 with me, but I've got this one here. You've linked some conditions to certain stages of psychological development. So what do people do to almost take action and shift their state from listening to this live? So what can people do immediately to go, where am I on this journey, and how do I make some transformation to the system now?
Okay, so if you're really diligent, you'll get evolutionary coaching, and the whole idea and the program is in there. And this book is actually parallel to the book What My Soul Told Me. So What My Soul Told Me is like the everyday person in the street who wants to know how to live in soul consciousness, move through these stages of development. What My Soul Told Me. If you're more of a professional and working in a office environment and are keen to get on, then evolutionary coaching has the same material in a little more, how shall I say, professional language. That's a good place to start. However, there's something really simple you can do to get going, and that is take out the separation in your life. So I learned a long time ago that in order to take out the separation, I learned several things, but one thing I'm going to tell you is that I speak to everybody. So if I'm getting on the bus, I will speak to the bus driver, and I will say, if I've got a moment, I'll say, what's making you happy today? Or I go into the coffee bar and I say to the barista, what's alive in you today? So I did this once in London about 5 years ago. So I hadn't been to this part of London before, and I was going to be there for 2 days on a course. I said to him, well, what's alive in you today? And he said, well, I said, I have to tell you, I just recorded a new song and put it out on YouTube. I said, fantastic. What is it? Give me the link. He gave me the link, and he said, so anyhow, what's alive in you today? I said, I just published a new book. He said, what's it called? I said, What My Soul Told Me. He said, oh, fine, great. So I went off, did my thing, came back for lunch, and he said, I read the first 50 pages of your book. He said, that's great. He said, I think I can write a song about that. Anyhow, so the point is, don't be afraid to speak to people that you meet in the street and ask them questions such as, what's making you happy today? What's the best thing that's happened to you this year? What's the best thing in your life at the moment? Because you're going to be asking questions that get to the heart of who they are and their energy. And you will find they just open up to you. And by just connecting, you make a difference in that person's life. We've got to learn to do that with each other. And so that would be my number one tip. Speak to everybody.
It feels like we've lost more of that than ever in some ways. The world is moving so fast, so full. We're having more and more connection online. And that, although the system is set, we think it's being set up for us to have greater connectivity, for life to be easier. In some way, we're losing this whole piece, aren't we?
We're missing the depth.
Yeah.
We're missing the depth. And that's why, and everybody, gets up in the morning, maybe there's somebody else in the house, then they go outside, they walk down the street, there's a street cleaner, stop, say, hey, you're doing a great job. What's going on for you today? Are you feeling happy? What's going on? You can talk to anybody. You see, we've got all these fear barriers about talking to people. And as you see, what we're doing is we're connecting as souls because we're all one anyhow. We're all connected. So why not live the connection? It changes your life completely. I'm even talking to you, Richard. Look, I'm even talking to you.
I know, and I'm honoured that you're even speaking to me. It's a privilege, actually.
I'll get out of here.
It's a privilege. And what I do love is about so Mia is 13, so that's an interesting dynamic in our life. But what fascinates me, she's done this for years, and I think she thinks it's less weird now than she did before, but she would often say to me at like 6, 7 years old, I'd chat to someone in a street, or someone would ask me a question, I'd have a chat with them. She'd go, do you know that person? I'd go, no. She's like, why'd you talk to them then?
Exactly.
And she still has a little bit of that now where she'll go, do you know that person? I go, no. And she doesn't think it's quite as weird, but I still think she thinks it's a bit weird. But clearly in some way we created that, right?
Absolutely.
A context we created for her to think that that's weird.
Yep.
What else do we need to know? What are your top tips for parents navigating teenagers?
Spend time talking to them about what's important to them. they need to feel a sense of recognition. Teenagers need to feel recognized. And that means they need to feel cared. They need to feel seen. That's the word I want. They need to feel seen by their parents, because if they're not, they'll go out and want to be seen by their peer groups. And if sometimes they get into peer groups which take them off the straight and narrow. So the key is to be very, very interested in your teenager's life. What's going on? What were you feeling? Not what happened at school today. I'll forget that. What were you feeling today? And did anything make you happy today? Did anything make you sad today? You need to get children talking about their feelings, because then you get right. Leonard Cohen says there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Well, the crack is feelings. That's how you get in.
I love it. I can't wait to start that conversation with her. I might even record that for you and send it to you. I think it'll go along the lines of, no. Fine. Yeah, it was okay. Normal. That's what I said her response to me. It was normal. It's just another normal day.
So then the next step, role model it. Well, I had this experience today and it really made me feel sad. Or I had this experience today and I felt a sense of joy. You have to role model it.
Yeah, do you know what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to tell her that next year I'm sending her away to Uncle Richard for 3 months in Tuscany.
Yeah, brilliant.
And she's going to get 3 months with Uncle Richard. She'll love that.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, send them all, no problem.
If anyone else on here wants to send their child to the creche in Tuscany next summer, we'll take bookings once we're done with the live tonight. Right, so I'm going to see if there's any other questions on here. Here's the evolution of coaching books. Are there any requirements to use your system, Richard, or licenses?
No, so if you want to use it professionally in organizations, then you have to do a 3 or 4 day training. And once you've done the training, you're free to use the system, and you contact Barrett Values Centre. They help you set up the assessment, and then they send you the results. And then you've been trained how to understand the model, understand the tools, and you're trained how to present the results to the client. So basically a 3 or 4 day training is what is required.
Okay, I can talk about that another time if anyone wants to pick this up afterwards. I love that this conversation has gone into on all the questions. Loads of people want to go to your creche, Richard, and they're actually people that are grown up. So,
okay, fine.
A creche for grown up. And there's also lots of people bringing the whole north-south divide in, saying that it's clearly the northerners that chat to more people than the southerners.
By gum, that's absolutely correct. I can tell you, lad, because I'm from Hull. And someone else, Kate Stacey, saying, yes, it's interesting because we tell our children not to talk to strangers. Which we spend a lot of time, and even more so now. Again, the world is less safe, and we shouldn't speak to people that we don't know. And so we've created some of that, haven't we? Yeah, and so there is a certain truth in that, but why not do it? Teach your kids to do that while they're with you. So you're going out, you're meeting somebody, encourage your kid to talk to that person and ask them questions like that, and supervise it first of all. I agree that it is a problem, but we're not going to if we live in fear, we're part of the problem.
Yeah, for sure. So look, tell me a bit about, you mentioned the new book. Tell me a bit about the new book and what's ahead for you in the next 12 months, do you think? I know you haven't got all the downloads yet in advance, but
yeah. So the Evolutionary Human is coming out soon, and then a book called Worldview Dynamics and Global Consciousness Indicators. So I've just created a new website where you've got all my new stuff out there. Is www.aahv.global, www.aahv.global, and everything that I'm doing, my new work is all in there, and that's where I will be publishing all my new work.
Okay, we're going to pop the link in for that for those of you that that want it. So that will be there ready for you to grab. There we go. There's the link already. See, Kelly, she's so on it.
Oh, yeah.
And Jack's saying, did you see it's Helena saying, did you see there was a great video where kids went and talked to adults in a cafe. Have you seen that?
No.
They put it out a few weeks ago where they went and got curious about speaking to older people and asking them questions about Brilliant. Things that, what things made them happy. And it was just a gorgeous moment. We'll post it in this so you can see it afterwards. It's really good.
Really terrific.
So how can people stay connected with you? Through the website's one way, obviously through the creche next year. What else?
Yeah, richardbarrett.net. And the other link that I'm going to put there from my new website. I have a blog, I have podcasts like you, I have videos, etc. So anything I do, I put out there. And Facebook is also great. I do a lot on Facebook. I put my personal stuff on there, and I put my professional stuff on there, and also on LinkedIn. LinkedIn and Facebook are my main two social media at the moment. That may change in the future. So okay. Just link up with me, and I put stuff out on Facebook every week, and I put stuff out on LinkedIn every month, basically.
I personally am very excited about spending a week with you in November. 5 days we get together.
Great. Me too.
And you can style my hair and everything.
It's great. I'm going to be, I'm not going to mention it ever again.
What, my hair?
Yeah.
No, but see, I think you are.
No, I don't think so.
No, I think you will. I think you're fibbing.
Okay. All right. We'll find out. In November.
So in November. Okay. So loads of thanks for you. Loads of love. Everyone wants to come to Tuscany. Basically, it's going to be a very busy summer for you. Some people would like to be a fly on the wall for my conversation with Mia, which is great. I'll film it. It's going to be a short conversation, but I'll film it. I am hugely grateful for having you on here too, Richard. For those of you that are watching, please share the video, because there's some hugely important messages that would be good to get out. For the more people that see them from Richard would be great. So please share it. And I will be doing at least one other deep dive interview with Richard in person at some point when we get him around here, when he's back in London.
Yeah, I'll be back in London on Thursday for the winter.
Awesome. So that will go out into the Limitless Tribe, for those of you that are in it for the membership site. We could go on talking, and I'm going to wrap it up there because I know we've been an hour already, and you're an hour ahead, aren't you?
Yeah.
10 o'clock for you. It's like,
I know, it's my bedtime,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll pack you off to bed with a hot milk or I don't know, some whiskey or
limoncello.
Limoncello. Oh, okay, very nice. Okay, I'm hugely grateful for your time and your energy and all you put out onto this planet that you have done and you continue to do. So I'm massively grateful.
Thank you. I can't help it.
I know. Please keep doing it.
It's what I have to do.
Please keep doing it.
Bye.
Okay. Big love to you folks. Keep putting questions in. If you want, we'll pick them up and we'll tag Richard in them. If you need a specific Richard response, you've got loads of ways of being able to get hold of him. Have an awesome week, everybody. Big love to you all. Big love to you, Richard. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.